I'm Brian Russell, and I want to talk about questions demanding an answer. We find ourselves in a profoundly interesting leadership climate right now. We have Gen Z folks entering college, and those who don't go to college are entering the workforce. We already have the millennial generation that's now getting into their mid to late 30s. Generation X is in their 40s and 50s now, and we still in early 60s, and we still have the baby boomers. So this multi-generational matrix of a workforce, and this causes us challenges. One of the fascinating things is, especially I'm a baby boomer, is how do you lead these emerging generations, in particular Gen Z, millennials? The Barna Research Group, I had the privilege of hearing a lecture on 5 traits that they're seeing in this Generation Z. And when I heard the questions, and I laid them up here, I thought to myself, wow, these are fascinating coaching questions. And these are almost like questions that, say, a person like myself, a 50-year-old who's been in the workforce a long time, who's beginning to ask kind of almost midlife transitional types of questions. And the Barna research is telling us that young people are already asking these kinds of questions. So if we want to learn to lead emerging generations, or maybe you were in the emerging generations, to be successful and to lead others, we have to realize that people are asking really deep questions from a young age. And these questions come in 5 categories, and there's 5 questions here. And let's take a look at each one of these for a minute and just ponder these. The first one is a classic question. It's the identity question. And our world is complex, and even the whole idea of having an identity has become complex and even controversial in some ways, and we're all pressed to find an identity. And that creates real pressure on people because a lot of folks, we want to fit in, and instead we tend to splinter ourselves more and more and more into different categories, which really begs the question, who am I really? What does it mean to be me? Who am I apart from all the roles that I play and all of my experiences? How would you answer that question? Our world is also full of anxiety. I know this from my own kids. The polls tell us that some of the emerging generations for the first time in American history are no longer thinking the future is going to be better than the past, that their lives aren't even going to be as good as their parents. So we're the age of anxiety, which is fascinating. And anxiety is something that I think we all feel, but emerging generations seem to feel it in particular, and they recognize the uncertainty that's part of life. Now, one of the key things that we all have to learn to balance as we mature and grow older is that there's always going to be a balance between certainty and uncertainty, right? Between security and a sense of variety that we have in our lives. But the anxiety question begs an answer, right? And that question is simply this: how shall I live? How do I live my life? How do I order my life? What habits should I embrace? What habits should I get rid of that will let me thrive in a way that will quiet the anxiety, apart from those easy cures to anxiety, right? And we all know what those things are. There's really unhealthy ways to deal with anxiety. We can just surf the web endlessly. We can use alcohol or drugs. We can even mask our anxiety with ideologies or with even workaholism. Again, there's positive ways, like no one ever tells somebody who works too much that they need to slow down. That's one of those accepted ways to deal with the anxiety. But young generations are asking, how shall I live? And if we're going to be leaders and we're going to help our teams to thrive, we need to recognize that just telling them to work harder isn't really going to be enough, because it's not answering this identity question or the anxiety question. We have to actually show them a life that's desirable, which really begs the question for us as leaders: are we living those kind of lives? Are we living a life that demands explanation? Because underneath anxiety for many people is a profound sense of loneliness, right? When I grew up, I'd go outside, we'd knock on doors, we had friends, we knew the neighbors, we knew the parents. I went to school with the same block of kids, essentially from kindergarten all the way through high school. Maybe that was unusual, but it wasn't necessarily unusual for a person who grew up in the Midwest. My family was all my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, all within about a 5 or 10 minute walk from my house. I knew I was loved. I had a community, I had friends, I had family, I had church. As religious attendance has gone down, that's increased loneliness. So, we have pressures on the family today with the high rise of divorce and brokenness. And I've seen that in my own self as I've been divorced and remarried and have a blended family. And I've seen the effects of divorce on my own children. And so it can create loneliness, right? All of these tensions. So the persons that were leading these emerging generations with the pressures on families, with the loss of really religious belief in our world, and with beyond just broken families, but our ability to live anywhere in the country, we don't have those close-knit ties like we used to with roots. It raises the question, am I loved? And that's an interesting thing to be thinking of as an employer, that my employees are worrying about, am I loved? But just picture that context. What would it look like to create a workplace? And again, I'm not going to suggest you automatically get touchy-feely, but what would it look like to envision your workplace really as a profound team of mutual respect that, in a sense, isn't going to ever replace the family, but can give people a real sense of belonging? Because that's what this question is really getting at. Am I loved is pointing to a deep sense of loneliness. And we can help people to find ties in our workplaces. If we build friendships in our workplaces, studies demonstrate that that's critical for the happiness of employees. So we want to recognize that this is a key piece. And then what about ambition? We want to help young people to harness that ambition that they have in their hearts. One of the things that's fascinating is that younger generations really put a high value on purpose and meaning in their workplaces. So again, it's not just enough to talk about, we want to hit these raw sales targets. Yeah, that's critical for our work, right? And we all know that we need to have goals that are financial. But what we need to really work to achieve with our teams is to instill a profound sense of what are we really about when we're doing this. Whatever product, if you're in sales, how does the product that we're trying to get our team to sell, how does that really serve and bless other people? One of the key things that leaders can do and business owners is to help their teams see how their roles within our team are actually serving our customers' highest good and giving them a way to plug into a purpose, because that's critical, because our emerging generations are looking for meaningful work. And then the last question is and this is where is a question of danger. It's that there's a sense of entitlement. And entitlement, though, is sort of a false feeling, because entitlement is all about us. But I think it's important that we flip that question and help our teams and the persons that we have the privilege of serving and leading is try to get our teams to ask something even bigger. What matters beyond me? We want our folks to find real grounding, and these emerging generations are longing to find a ground that they can put their feet on, something bigger than themselves, something bigger than being an iPod or an iPhone, having me. And they want to be part of a bigger global vision for good. So as leaders, again, these are questions and again, I'm a 50-year-old guy. When I want to ask myself these questions, and when I work with my own coach, these are some of the very things that I work on. But I wasn't asking these when I was a young person per se. But again, the research is saying Gen X, millennials, the younger generations are coming into our workplaces, our classrooms, our churches, and they want to help with these big questions, questions that are demanding an answer. Are you ready to help? Can you lead? Again, I'm Brian Russell. It would be my privilege to work with your team on these questions, to work with you with these questions. If I can serve you in any way, leave a comment, send me a message. Thank you for listening. And again, it's absolute privilege to spend some time with you today.